Welcome to the Virtual Shift, a show looking at the seismic changes happening in healthcare with virtual care at the epicenter. Join me and my guests as we look at key cultural and policy shifts impacting how providers, payers, and patients connect, as well as how care is being reimagined both for today and the future. Hello, and thanks for tuning in today. I'm your host, Tom Foley. You can learn more about this show by visiting the program on healthcarenowradio.com, and be sure to follow me on LinkedIn, Twitter at FoleyTom, and the hashtag The Virtual Shift. Today we have Bobby Shah, CEO of DocBox. Bobby, welcome to the show.
Tom, thank you. Thank you for having me.
So Bobby, thanks for joining us, by the way. I'm very excited about having you on the program. This is the Virtual Shift, so we're talking about what is the shift, right? Virtual care being the part of the impetus of the reformation and reimagination of the delivery of care. So I want our listeners to understand what is the shift, who are the major contributors to it. I believe DocBox is one of those contributors to it, so I'm excited to have this conversation with you. So let's start off by telling the audience a little bit about yourself.
Tom, thank you. My name is Bobby Shah, the CEO of DocBox. I got into healthcare about 2 decades ago. I'm one of those people that was trying to avoid medical school. There comes a point in your life where you can't find healthcare, it's destined for you. And actually, someone very close to me had a really bad medical condition. Since then, invented a couple of medical products, one a syringe for epidurals called EpiSure, and latter my second company, which was a family of infusion pumps. And it was our infusion pump that was part of a study at Mass General back in early 2010, and that's how I got to know DocBox.
Very interesting. So you've been shifting healthcare nonetheless. Forget about the virtual shift. You've been shifting healthcare by the innovation of medical devices long ago. So interesting in and of itself. So tell us a little bit about DocBox. What are you guys doing, and how are you contributing to the shift?
Tom, just a bit of background. So DocBox started in 2007, really from a biomedical engineer being sent from Kaiser over to Mass General to form a federation bringing medical device companies to the table to say, what does data, standards, architecture need to look like so everyone can play nice and everyone can share data together? A little bit too early. I think the expectation was set high. But out of that was formed DocBox. So DocBox started with the support of the Department of Defense, some other government agencies, standards body and regulatory bodies, and they developed an open data architecture. They developed a standards-based architecture, an open data model. And 2016, DocBox created the Clinician's Assistant in Critical Care. Prior to this global pandemic, the primary focus has been the Department of Defense. And what are they trying to achieve? The aim is to have care being delivered to an individual being anywhere and the physician being remote, where he can monitor a patient anywhere from a makeshift ICU that's being set up in real time. Now you come forward to a global pandemic where there is a lack of skilled physicians, a lack of nurses, and everybody, the entire population now needs some form of healthcare. You know, Tom, really with scarcity comes clarity, and really that's what this pandemic has caused in healthcare. So what do? For us, we took what we're doing in the Department of Defense and really applied that to a need that's domestic and international. And in first time in my history, I've seen it being aligned between government, domestic and international, where you've got a total lack of skilled resources. You've got the existing resources that are overworked. You've got not enough beds and everyone needing some form of medical care and medical treatment. But also you've got physicians now that are giving highly skilled intensivists, working with intensivists, trying to get that quality of care, and also fighting to take critical care outside the hospital walls to wherever that patient is into the home. So what did DocBox do? DocBox really became that bedside ICU integrator. We're a solution that's the only solution that's vendor neutral because we came from the Department of Defense. We're a secure medical IoT platform. We're based on open standards. We're the only one that's open standards, where we can get accurate and easy real-time data at the bedside And we do that with our partner today, which is HP. And that's what we're able to provide today. So it's really bringing in all this data. We automate nursing documentation by 70%. You're now able to have a nurse that's spending more time by the bedside in the ICU. The physician relationship between a physician and nurse increased. Quality of care increases. And that's really what we've been able to provide. We can do it down to one patient. We can do it as big as a healthcare system.
So you made a couple statements, and I want to dive a little deeper there. You talked about scarcity of resources. Certainly, the pandemic has created that. The ICUs are certainly overcrowded, but the rest of the hospital might be, to some degree, vacant. But access to patient care and access to care in and of itself, I look at that in the context of what is happening on the ambulatory side. So you're talking about the acute side for the most part, but the ambulatory side, I look at where we were going before COVID even hit. And my audience has heard me say this 1,000 times. The average Medicare patient, 5 chronic conditions, sees 9 different doctors, and they spend 15 hours in front of the doctor in a given year. Well, the first question is, what happens the other 8,745 hours? The other question that goes more directly to scarcity, the macro trends are that I have an older population, a growing population, an aging population, and a sicker population. They're contracting more chronic conditions as they get older. That's a problem in and of itself. But the other half of the problem is I have less doctors and nurses. There's the scarcity in the market in general. So the second question is, how do I treat an older age or sicker population with less doctors and nurses? Right. So you're saying DocBox is able to leverage an open architecture, which they help build, to integrate medical devices to reduce the burnout of physicians. Is that a fair statement?
That's fair. That's very
fair statement. Not only burnout of physicians, but burnout of nurses as well. So I look at your technology and I think about remote patient monitoring. ICU, you started there. That's your seeds, right? Yeah. That's where you grew up. And I'm not trying to be sarcastic, but that's where you built your presence. But medical devices, they're all different flavors. But the key here is, how do you integrate those medical devices wherever they may be? In the home, because the home is a setting of care, the ICU, a setting of care, the hospital room, the general room, a setting of care. They all have devices. And we're all spending way too much time reading the device and submitting errors into the chart because we mistyped. And I'm not trying to be, again, disparaging, but we all know that is a problem in and of itself. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, and then, Tom, what you hit upon is exactly right? What we have experienced is inpatient data being segregated from outpatient data, which means that, telehealth companies are only seeing really the data once when the patient's either discharged or they're seeing information up to the patient is admitted to the hospital. They're not seeing that inpatient. How do you get that continuum of care? Right across from whether they're in the ICU to home or even from the home, and at what point do you see events occurring where you say, okay, now I need to skip the emergency room and go straight to the ICU for these patients? Or how do I monitor them in real time? Because the challenge that you're getting, we know this, right? Telehealth was 4%. It's growing now past 50%, growing faster. But, from where it started to just 18 months ago to where it's today, it's accelerated. You want to get away from where telehealth is paper and pen, creating silo and ghost systems. And if someone has the task afterwards of going in and manually entering into their HIS or EMR system, but you're back to paper-based and human error. We're all humans. We're back to that, right? So this is where DocBox has really come in and been that back-end infrastructure for telehealth companies, so they can have that continuum of care for the patients. Because if you're taking really critical care outside the hospital walls, you're not going to have a ventilator at home, right? But there are other certain level of critical care that you can provide. And now with this data, right? So from patient side is 2 to 3 gigabytes of patient data per day per bed these healthcare providers are collected. With that, the intelligence and the algorithms they can develop. So in order to look at their certain patient sector, so that when you've got these intensivists, you want AI to come and look at these events, pre-give alarms, predictive analysis, so that when they're looking at, what's the aim? An intensivist is trying to monitor 1,000 patients in real time. That's really what they're trying to achieve. You can only do that before intelligence. You need the data. In order to have the data, you need it right from the inpatient to the outpatient to wherever that individual is going to be, bi-directional. And then with devices, we all know the challenges of devices. We know the issues with multiple timestamps. You walk into an ICU, multiple manufacturers, different languages, they're not all standard-based, but just pulling timestamps are different. Then how do you pull that? And then you're trying to get intelligence from, okay, I'm going to build algorithms out of the EMR, but we all know that the nurses are being asked for more and more, and physicians, to enter into the EMR. The weights and the burdens on them, and you talk about burnout, it's not being reduced, it's being increased with this annual level.
Yeah, and it's a great point, right? So with technology comes a burden to some degree. We shedded some challenges, paper, and we're now in E, but I got my head down in my EHR for a large portion of the encounter, and patients hate it, frankly. So let's step back here again. So I have different settings of care. We hear hospital at home, the home becoming a setting of care in an ambulatory setting. We have, again, all those different medical devices. And I know all too well my father had huge complications from diabetes, lost both legs, lost an arm. I know all too well about turning that dining room into a bedroom and having all of what you need to take care of that patient at home, because my mother didn't want to do it in the hospital, and he even did dialysis at home. And this goes back 20 years, and which is a much different time in healthcare even then. And so what you're ultimately saying from a DocBox perspective is that you can interconnect these different settings, or embed yourself into these settings and aggregate this data and bring it into the chart from an end user perspective. Me, the patient, me, the doctor, right? It brings simplicity to the table, and you take care of the heavy plumbing. Fair?
Oh, very fair, right? So what are we doing? That time you're spending away from the patient, where you're documenting, we bring that care provider back to the bedside. Why? Because everything occurs at the bedside. So the documentation, as I mentioned earlier, it's automated by 70%. We can capture nursing notes right by the bedside. The fact that we're vendor neutral, the fact that we're an open platform, that comes with multiple benefits, even from a financial aspect, and we haven't even touched that yet, that topic, but from a financial aspect, having an open platform is huge, because how do you scale if you're not open outside the hospital walls? It gets extremely expensive. We already know the financial burden that was before COVID, let alone post-COVID, on a lot of these providers. So, what we're able to do is really empower, provide information in real time in a unified manner, so that better care, more time can be given to the patient, but also what occurs and what needs to occur is happening more in real time, which is what's happening here as well. Now, we push to the EMR, we push to the HIF, we do that today, right? So this now gives a level of bedside. You can also monitor what you monitor from the bedside from any location, which is what can happen as well. And that's really where you're taking critical care, real-time monitoring to where the patient is, where the physician is, and having that nurse right by there. Just simple examples, right, with COVID wards. Having COVID wards in ICUs where you've got, the intensivist in one location, monitoring not just that ICU in that hospital, but 10 different ICUs in 10 different locations. Now he's able to see in real time what occurs, but something unique happens at DocBox that doesn't happen anywhere else. When you're on an
Yes.
aeroplane, you know there's a black box. You don't know where it is. You hope it never gets used. But if there's ever an issue, they will go to that black box. That's what happens in DocBox. That's one thing that's not provided anywhere else, and we see that. So if any real issue occurs where they need to go back and recreate what has occurred, this is where, our solution is the clinician's assistant in critical care, because that's what we are. We are the assistant to the clinicians in critical care. They can go into this and really look at the entire, from the time the patient was admitted to what occurred. They can go in and recreate this in real time and see exactly what happens. And that's extremely, extremely powerful.
Very interesting. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to The Virtual Shift, and I'm your host, Tom Foley. I'm talking today with Bobby Shah, as CEO of DocBox. So, Bobby, all great points. I love the open architecture, frankly. I love the black box concept. It's truly technology being that visible assistant, if you will, but a valuable assistant, right? You talked about a couple things that I want to dive into in the second half of the conversation. One, finances, but before we get there, I even want to talk about AI. What does DocBox do in the context of AI?
So we work very closely with our providers. And the reason why is our core solutions deployed, and there are levels of algorithms and AI that are specific to some of these providers that they've had in the queue, Tom. I've been shocked. For almost a decade, the technology was never there. Data was never there in order for things to happen.
So what you're saying is that the algorithms were there, the thoughts were there. They just didn't have a data feed that algorithm could leverage.
Exactly. That platform deploy upon the rich standard-based contextual data, 2 to 3 gigabytes of patient data per day per bed. Previously they've been working on simulation data, test data. Now you're able to get this volume of data so that they can create algorithms. So we work with providers. We create algorithms for them as well. Our level of AI that we work today has really reduced this nursing documentation time by 70%, which is what it's really done, and that's the empowering now and allowing that nurse to spend that more time by the patient, but not just that patient now, spread that time they would have lost documenting amongst others. But we also know, the errors that occur with humans under stress, during all of this that occurs right now. Yeah. And we're just humans at the end of the day. So
you're reducing errors, creating efficiency, and it's not that you need less resources now, but the resources that you have, human resources that you have, can spend more time with patients of greater need, one, and or can spend greater amount of time across the population of beds to maximize the quality of care that a patient needs.
Exactly. Tom, one thing we don't control, we cannot make a day more than 24 hours.
And I would imagine you talked earlier about the DoD. This is deployed across the DoD?
It is. So we've been working with the DoD. What has occurred is what's been formed since COVID is the National Emergency Telecritical Care Network, known as NEXN. And NEXN really consists of a team. It's a team of remote experts that support patient care anywhere via a secure, HIPAA-compliant live video messaging, phone, file sharing system. So what does that mean? You're able to rapidly deploy, whether it be a stadium with 1,000 beds, right? You've got a ventilator, monitor, infusion pumps. Rapidly deploy an ICU, which is what you're able to do. And DocBox is that core back-end architecture for devices to integrate. We also use what's called DDS, data distribution system, in order to allow that connectivity to occur and really take that to wherever that care provider is, wherever that physician is. And the physician may be on a smartphone, which is what it is. So NEXN has really been that promotion, and ASPA is the one also that's supporting NEXN in order for us to look and roll this out. So where you're starting to see, and this is the exciting part of it, this is really predominantly for the government originally, but now this has been requested by multiple hospitals, across the US that have these COVID spurts, that really you've got nurses and physicians that this is not their skill set, that they're able to deploy this, they're able to use this Netson solution and have remote access to intensivists, critical care specialists right there and then, so they can provide the care, diagnosis, whatever needs to happen. And Netson has been this huge provider for this. So, I would say, anyone listening that you're aware of Netson, Netson's more than happy to go ahead and provide this as a service to you to help support you. It's there, it's available today. Anyone can sign up. You can come to DocBox. We can have Netson with you, support you. We can introduce you to the group, etc.
So, talk to me a little bit more about the overall financial side of the equation. We hit on it a bit earlier in the conversation. You can intuitively sense that greater efficiency, greater quality of care should translate into a financial element for the health system. So it's not all about just spending money and adopting technology and hope for the best, but you seem to have produced some very critical results. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Tom, as you know, COVID has broken the mold in many ways in healthcare. Yeah. While it's a shame that it's happened, I believe it gives us a chance really to create a mold that will really benefit generations to come, but also it will support hospitals to scale, physicians and nurses, increase the quality of care to more patients. And how, So what we provided is a solution by the bedside that has an ROI. And ROI has been a big focus on us. History, you spend millions of dollars, takes years to, deploy a solution, a year to train, very invasive. It's a long-term commitment. It was fine when you were providing health within the hospital walls. Trying to take that and scale, we know it doesn't work. So what do we do? We do what's called activity tracking. That patient is almost like, if you look at the way IoT is going, everyone's going to be a walking IP address, right? That's where it's going, And if you look at by the bedside, what actually do you know about that patient? So what we did and what we focused on was called activity tracking. We could tell you exactly a ventilator time off, exactly a ventilator time on, exactly intubation, exactly lines and tubes. There are multiple procedures, events that we can actually tell you that happens to that patient. And why is that important? Why? Because if studies that we did, we saw that, just with the overworked and burnout that's occurring, there is missing that's occurring in billing. We know that revenue leakage in the United States is 40%. We know 1% of revenues in hospitals are written off because they just don't have the documentation to go back to the insurance provider to actually provide that supporting documentation. So what we're able to do is give you accurate events. So whether that's for accurate costing, accurate billing, auditing purposes, for fraud, waste, and abuse purposes, we can provide that report internally. And because of that, we're a SaaS business, right? So we're a license fee per bed per month for the entire solution. So it takes away the burden of being a CapEx. But for those that are a CapEx, the ROI on this is less than 24 months, and it's unheard of, which is what it really is. So because of that, it's been a huge advantage that now you've got a solution that we can provide increased quality of care, reduce the burden of our existing caregivers, increase the quality and integrity of the information that we're receiving so we can make better decisions. We can also provide operational data where we show throughput. We have seen, bottlenecks occurring, and they've made adjustments for throughputs. This is important. So our solution tackles, infrastructure, We can do a rapid deployment. We do mapping. We provide the drivers. We provide clinical advantage. We provide operational advantage, but also a financial aspect here. And this is because why? Original, customer and we're partner is the government, right? And they wanted to really provide that quality of care to the millions in the United States.
Awesome. I have to stop you there because we're out of time. But great stuff DocBox is doing. I really am excited about what you're bringing to market and the shift that you are creating. I think the story is yet unwritten in the context of the transformation of care. And I think that the DocBox is going to be is kind of the underlying plumbing necessary to create that shift ubiquitously across the communities of care. So, Bobby, I want to thank you for your time. Hopefully, we can have you back on to continue the conversation. And until then, have a great day.
Tom, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you very much.
I would like to thank the show sponsors, both HP and Intel. HP Engage long lifecycle products provide the stability, safety, and security you need, plus flexibility and performance designed for today and tomorrow. As well, Intel would like you to know we're going above and beyond together with new standards for business with the latest Intel vPro processors, delivering what IT needs for performance, security, remote manageability, and stability. And be sure to check out the program page on healthcarenowradio.com. And remember, connect or follow me on LinkedIn, Twitter, @FoleyTom, and follow the show's hashtag, The Virtual Shift. I'm Tom Foley. Until the next shift.